Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Psalm Sunday. This is a regular feature on this channel where we're going through the Psalms in an effort to talk about translation. We talk about other things too. We examine what's going on in each Psalm, a little bit anyway. But my main point in doing this is to underscore a point that I make about all kinds of literature, which is that if you're dealing with a translator, the most important thing is how you get along with the translation, not what critics think about whichever translation you get along with. It's far more important that you actually get through the work. It's very rare these days that a translator will do harm to a work and will harm your initial understanding of it. That is very rare. It's more likely it'll just be a matter of nuance or finesse. And if you end up loving the work, and how many of us have loved works in translation that we've never read in the original, I think probably everybody has, if you end up loving the work, you're going to want to examine other translations anyway. You're going to want to examine the nuances, maybe even learn the original language. So we're going through a psalm every Sunday, and today we're going to do Psalm number 145. And I've got 3 translations that we'll go through, and we'll see what we make of them. I'm guessing that back-to-back comparison of Psalm number 145 will not, in this case, show all that many differences because of the nature of the psalm. So we'll read Psalm 145, and we will start with the King James Bible. I will extol thee, O God, my King. I will bless thy name forever and ever. Every day I will bless thee, and I will praise thy name forever and ever. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable. One generation shall praise thy works to another, and shall declare thy mighty acts. I will speak of the glorious honor of thy majesty, and of thy wondrous works. And men shall speak of the might of thy terrible acts, and I will declare thy greatness. They shall abundantly utter the memory of thy great goodness, and shall sing of thy righteousness. The Lord is gracious, and full of compassion, slow to anger, and of great mercy. The Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works. All thy works shall praise thee, O Lord, and thy saints shall bless thee. They shall speak of the glory of thy kingdom, and talk of thy power, to make known to the sons of men thy mighty acts and the glorious majesty of his kingdom. Thy kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and thy dominion endureth throughout all generations. The Lord upholdeth all that fall, and raiseth up all that be bowed down. The eyes of all wait upon thee, and thou givest them their meat in due season. Thou openest thine hand, and satisfiest the desire of every living thing. The Lord is righteous in all his ways, and holy in all his works. The Lord is nigh unto all that call upon him, and to all call upon him in truth. He will fulfill the desire of them that fear him. He will also hear their cry, and will save them. The Lord preserveth all them that love him, but all the wicked he will destroy. My mouth shall speak the praise of the Lord. Let all flesh bless his holy name forever and ever. You can see very clearly the liturgical origin of most of these things. That is clearly meant to be chanted in a group in a temple. It's not meant as any kind of incisive theology. It is simply a hymn of praise, and couched in very monarchical terms. It was typical for courtiers and other favor seekers for human monarchs to use that kind of orotund language, that kind of over-the-top, you are all things, your sunlight shines on all horizons type language. If you're in a worshipful congregation, you're not really expected to ask whether or not such language should apply to a non-human being, to a being that is not in any way human, who has never been a king in any kind of conventional sense. Would such a being even recognize such praise, and would they want it? Instead, you're just supposed to, for want of a better phrase, you're supposed to get into the mood of things. So it's very ecstatic hyperbole. Now we'll move on to the Jerusalem Bible. I've got 3 Bibles here that were done by committee. No individual Bibles this time around. The Jerusalem Bible we have found, let's move on to 145 in the Jerusalem Bible. The Jerusalem Bible we have found, I think, generally, to be less poetic. It's pretty tough to be more poetic than the King James Bible, but a couple of times the Jerusalem Bible has seemed almost clunky in its rendition. Sorry, there's a little being active behind me there. So let's see what Psalm 145 is in the Jerusalem Bible. I predict that it will be very similar. Why? What would be the point? What would be the reason why a translation of this would drastically change? This is a fairly simple theme, fairly simple concept behind the language. I sing your praises, God my King. I bless your name forever and ever, blessing you day after day and praising your name forever and ever. Can anyone measure the magnificence of Yahweh the Great and his inexpressible grandeur? Celebrating your acts of power, one age shall praise your doings to another. Oh, the splendor of your glory, your renown. I tell myself the story of your marvelous deeds. Men will proclaim your fearful power, and I shall assert your greatness. They will celebrate your generous kindness and joyfully acclaim your righteousness. He, Yahweh, is merciful, tender-hearted, slow to anger, very loving, and universally kind. Yahweh's tenderness embraces all his creatures. Yahweh, all your creatures thank you, and your faithful bless you. Kingly and glorious they proclaim you, they affirm your might. Let mankind learn your acts of power and the majestic glory of your sovereignty. Your sovereignty is an eternal sovereignty. Your empire lasts from age to age. Always true to his promises, Yahweh shows love in all he does. Only stumble, and Yahweh at once supports you. If others bow you down, he will raise you up. Patiently all creatures look to you to feed them throughout the year, quick to satisfy every need. You feed them all with a generous hand. Righteous in all that he does, Yahweh acts only out of love, standing close to all who invoke him, close to all who invoke Yahweh faithfully. Those who fear him need only to ask to be answered. He hears their cries for help and saves them. Under his protection, the pious are safe, but Yahweh is destruction to the wicked. Yahweh's praise be ever in my mouth. Let every creature bless his holy name forever and ever. So again, very, very similar. There's a lot more going on in this psalm in a kind of letter and word game way. When you dig into it, this is a psalm that seems very simple and pietistic on the surface, but has a huge amount of numerological research underneath it. We don't need to worry about that. We only need to be thinking about what we're reading. Never mind, right? Because with all of these psalms, almost all of them, we're ice skating over the surface of something that has been studied, literarily speaking, numerically speaking, mystically speaking, kabbalistically speaking, for centuries, to the obsession of all else. I guarantee you that there have been at least 1,000 scholars in the last 3,000 years who have devoted their entire adult life to studying this one psalm. No others, just this one. So we're not going to worry about those subterranean levels as we move on to our last translation today. What you doing? What are you doing back there? Huh? Sorry about that. That is a bit distracting, isn't it? Baby, what are you doing? What are you doing back there? Huh? Come here. Are you just going to stand there staring? Oh, darling, I don't know. That's a little distracting, Frida. Bean, you can't just stand there staring at me. That's a little distracting. Here. There you go. Lay down and make yourself home. There you go. Okay, we're going to move on to another extremely popular Bible, probably in terms of numbers and usage, probably far more popular than the King James and the Jerusalem Bible put together, and that is the NIV. Which is in every church. It's used. I'd love to know, actually, from all of you Christians out there, is the NIV just your congregation's default Bible? I'd love to know. I get the feeling that it's extremely widely known because it's got a good critical provenance, but it's far more accessible in terms of its language. In this particular Psalm 145, you don't need to worry about that. Even with the King James, there are no translation mysteries here. But what are you doing, baby? What are you doing? Sorry, this was unexpected. Let's go to Psalm 145 in the NIV and see what we make of it here, and then we'll talk about it a bit. So let's see here. I will exalt you, my God the King. I will praise your name forever and ever. Every day I will praise you and extol your name forever and ever. God, great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness no one can fathom. One generation will commend your works to another. They will tell of your mighty acts. They will speak of the glorious splendor of your majesty, and I will meditate on your wonderful works. They will tell of the power of your awesome works, and I will proclaim your great deeds. They will celebrate your abundant goodness and joyfully sing to your righteousness. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and rich in love. The Lord is good to all. He has compassion on all he has made. All you have made will praise you, O Lord. Your saints will extol you. They will tell you of the glory of your kingdom and speak of your might, so that all men may know your mighty acts and glorious splendor of your kingdom. Your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and your dominion endures throughout all generations. The Lord is faithful to all his promises and loving towards all he has made. The Lord upholds all those who fall and lifts up all those who are bowed down. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food at the proper time. You open your hand and satisfy the desires of every living thing. The Lord is righteous in all his ways and loving towards all he has made. The Lord is near to all who call on him in truth. He fulfills the desire of those who fear him. He hears their cries and saves them. The Lord watches over all who love him, but all the wicked he will destroy. My mouth will speak the praise of the Lord. Let every creature praise his holy name forever and ever. So again, you see, it's all very. There's hardly any difference between these three translations. The Jerusalem Bible rather pointedly leaves out any mention of saints, but other than that, it's virtually the same. So this, if you're doing the exercise that I often advocate on Psalm Sunday, of pulling down a few different translations and going through them in order to note their differences and maybe talk about them with your friends, you won't have much to talk about on that level with this psalm. It is a fairly simple hymn of praise. Overdone, fearful, courtier praise. So the type of you are the greatest, nothing is greater than you, you are the best in everything you do, praise that courtiers to old-style kings who control armies would say. They made a profession out of saying things like that. That isn't done in modern kingdoms anymore, to the most part, but that's the language that's being used here. It's very much not a language that calls on the intangible. The only non-translation comment I can make here about this psalm, non-translation because the translation issue is not that big a deal this time around, is the obvious error. I mean, the obvious errors of this psalm. Yes, it is an ecstatic hymn of praise, but no matter where you get this kind of toadying hymn of praise, no matter where you get that, such hymns of praise must necessarily have falsehood and error in them. Whether it's a psalm like this, or whether it's former U.S. President Donald Trump insisting that all of the ministers around his cabinet table sing his praises like a North Korean dictator. That protracted exercise in professional humiliation is on camera. You can look at it on YouTube. None of the protestations that any of those people make are true in any detail or in spirit. But they did them anyway, because that's just the nature that takes hold when you have a circumstance like this, when you have fearful subordination. That's what you will do. You will sing praises like that. And likewise, that's true here. If we look at the statements and the promises that are made in here, none of them are true even by the standard of the Bible itself. The Bible itself contradicts things like, what have we got here? The Lord is gracious and full of compassion, slow to anger, and of great mercy. The Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works. Nothing could be further from the truth. The only way you could say that, the only way, for instance, if you were a 21st century Christian fundamentalist and you read that, the only way that you could believe it is if you had not read the Bible, any of it, because that is serially contradicted throughout the Bible. God is not slow to anger. He's incredibly quick to anger. Some of the humans that he deals with are surprised, taken aback, and even kind of want to calm him down. That's how fast to anger he is. He's far faster to anger than any human is. And he's not good to all his creations. He's not good to the faithful who grovel in praise of him, but he's also not good to anybody else. He destroys the world. He destroys the world because the people in Judea are bothering him. According to the myth of Noah's flood, I want to point out again here, it is indisputably a myth. According to the myth of Noah's flood, every lion in Africa, every elephant in Asia, every newborn baby anywhere in the world, every in utero fetus everywhere in the world, they all had to die because the men of Judea were behaving badly in the eyes of God. That's not slow to anger, and that's not just to all his creations. And not to tie this psalm too closely to current events, but that the Lord preserveth all them that love him, but the wicked he will destroy. Needless to say, that is demonstrably false. That is just demonstrably false. The only way that you can twist that into something that you can nod and believe in Sunday service is if you think it's metaphorical somehow. That's a route, an interpretive route that we have seen the Psalms often drive a reader to, especially a religious reader. Because if you're a religious reader and you believe in the inerrancy of this text, well, this psalm puts you in a horribly awkward position. This text is obviously wrong. God does not preserve even those who are most vocal in his praise, and he does not punish the wicked. That's been true. I mean, the grandparents of people who go to temple and worship and praise, sing these psalms, their grandparents were annihilated by an evil that was punished by men, imperfectly and unequally by men, but not at all by God. I'm not trying to attack anyone's faith here, but the statements that are being made here, we need to put an interpretive gloss on them. The minute you read eyewitness accounts in history of 70-year-old rabbis being worked to death, beaten, and then having their corpses thrown in an oven by men who died in their beds at age 90, you know that on the grounds of simple fact, this psalm is wrong. And one of the most ready interpretive glosses that you can put on it when you realize that, because that's an awkward place to be in, right? If you have an earnestly held religious belief in these doctrine, you're going to get to a psalm like this, and you're going to love the parts. Your soul will be exalted by the parts that are praising the wonder of God. But the psalm doesn't just do that. It does that, and it also makes claims for the power of God, for the mercy of God, that are not true in the text, and they're not true in the real world around you. That's an awkward place to be in if your faith is living in these documents. The typical gloss that faith will put on this is actually, interesting enough, the gloss that those courtiers often put on their words, which is to sort of shape them in a kind of conditional future subjunctive, that someday these grand pronouncements will be true, that there are impediments now, but someday your mercy will be all-encompassing. Someday your compassion will touch even those who don't believe in you. Someday being the operative thing here, the operative concept. That's kind of what the faithful have to do when they read something like this. This psalm is telling you outright that God fulfills all hungers, that no one wants if they believe in him. And you know that's not true. Even the most fundamental Jewish service member or Christian knows that's not true. This week, the tragic news events of this week have underscored it more than ever. That you cannot make claims like that for your God. He is not materially present in the world. And this psalm and a lot of other psalms do, and you can kind of understand why they would, right? I mean, surely there is no place, these would have been sung in the great temple in Jerusalem. Surely there was no place anywhere in the world where it was easier to believe that your God was manifest in the world than right there and right then, surrounded by ecstatic worshipers, with the chant, you could hear in there the back and forth. I say this, you say this, I say this, you say this. That would have been probably a service that would have been led by a community leader, a rabbi, who you loved and respected, who'd been guiding over your education and your moral questions for the whole of your adult life. Surely in a situation like that, it would be easier than anywhere else to recite this and actually materially believe it. But again, I want to point out the great temple with all of its study carrels and its hidden offices and its basement abattoirs and its gigantic open spaces, gigantic, beautiful prosceniums for worship. That whole temple was razed to the ground by the Romans. No one stopped it. No God stopped it. No one was comforted by that. People were thrown into absolute chaos, thrown into mental, personal, spiritual chaos. So even there, I guess what I'm trying to say is that this psalm is making promises that you know it can't keep. Maybe there was a golden moment in that temple 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, when it might have been possible to think, the day has come, the Lord is triumphant, he keeps his promises, he is slow to anger, he loves all. I don't know. I would think that would be hard. It would have been hard even then in that temple. You were raised, if you sang that in temple in 120 BC, you had still been raised. You'd still been to school. You'd still been raised with stories that tell you the exact opposite about God, that he's a capricious, thin-skinned, short-tempered, murderous tyrant. I mean, it's impossible to avoid that impression when you read the actual book that all of this comes from. So you've got, for this psalm, that's the the main interpretive bugaboo. But that I would argue need concern us least of all interpretive bugboos. I mean, I wanted to trot it around the block just because I read this thing this morning to talk about it to you today, and it was on my mind. But I would argue that when you do this exercise, when you pull down 4 or 5 Bibles, when you go to a Bible study center with your friends and pull down 5 or 6 Bibles and look at Psalm 145, I would argue that with this psalm, as with most other psalms, wearing the bone of whether or not it's true is probably the least profitable thing to do. The only reason that I gave it time today is because there isn't much in the way of profitable things to do with this one. It's simply an exuberant hymn of praise. So you saw the translations barely varied at all. It wasn't really much to wonder about in terms of did this translating group get it right or get it wrong. It's instead a question of which one you like the most. That's the only reason that I went with what about the actual claims in the psalm. For the most part, for 2,000-year-old religious texts, you should be going instead for the fluid, what you think about the translation. So maybe I'm picking these psalms at random, so maybe next time a few more of those issues will be a little bit more forefront. We'll wrap this up for now. We'll meet next Sunday and see if that's true. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.